Hello, everyone. Welcome to day two of the Virtual Island Summit. Thank you so much for joining us for this session. My name is Christian Zacchino. I am the Director of Operations at Island Innovation. I am from Margarita Island in the Caribbean, but I'm currently based in the beautiful coastal city of Vigo in Galicia, northwest of Spain. I'm pleased to be here as your moderator for today's session. Island Innovation is a sustainable development consultancy primarily focusing on islands. Our services include events, strategic communications, and capacity building. We are trusted by clients around the globe, and if you're interested in learning more about our work, please reach out to us using the contact information available in the chat. As I mentioned earlier, I'm very happy to be moderating this session, which is sponsored by one of our very special clients, the Saint Lucia National Conservation Fund. This session is titled The Marine Health Alliance, Advancing Community-Driven Marine Conservation in Saint Lucia and the Caribbean. Before we begin, you should see a poll appear now on your screen. Please let us know your gender, where you are connecting from, and the sector and the industry you belong to. So hopefully the poll is, there we go. While you answer that, let's speak a bit about the Marine Health Alliance. Thanks to the backing of the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund, the creation of a Marine Health Alliance was aimed to forge strong ties with the tourism industry to bolster marine conservation, protect threatened biodiversity, and promote healthy ocean ecosystems and reefs. This alliance symbolizes a strategic collaboration aimed at a sustainable marine health investment on the island. The Marine Health Alliance is described as a catalyst for change for ocean stewardship in St. Lucia. It focuses on a dynamic approach, combining top-down interventions with grassroots project delivery. This initiative is supported by the Tourism Enhancement Fund, TEF, the philanthropic arm of the St. Lucia Hospitality and Tourism Association, SLHTA, which periodically issues calls for proposals to empower local communities, youth groups, and the public and private sector initiatives in enhancing national marine conservation efforts. The St. Lucia Hospitality and Tourism Association, the TEF, and the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund are committed to engaging with local stakeholders and visitors, informing them about the Marine Health Alliance, and providing opportunities for support through voluntary contributions, annual memberships, or corporate sponsorships. All right, I can see a lot of people in the chat. Thank you for attending to this session. I see people from the USA, from the UK, from Central Africa, Trinidad and Tobago, Indonesia, the Azores, Madeira, Reunion Island, Aruba, St. Kitts and Nevis, Colombia, Japan. Thank you everyone for participating. Now let's see the poll results. There we go. So we have most of you connecting from the Caribbean, almost 50%, and it makes sense. This is a Caribbean-oriented session, but we also have a lot of people from Europe that want to learn about the initiatives of the Marine Health Alliance. We also have people from Africa, North America, Asia, Indian Ocean, and the Pacific. Most of the attendees here belong to the private sector, closely followed by other sectors, government, NGO, and academia. And I can see that almost 35% belong to the environmental services or oceans conservation sectors, which makes sense given the topic of the session. But we also have people in tourism, politics and governments, waste and circular economy, finance, and others. Thank you for attending this session. Now, I invite you to please make use of the chat functionality to introduce yourself and where you are joining us from. And you can make any comments during the session. You're also welcome to share your LinkedIn card to interact with the other attendees. But any question that you may have for the panel, please use the Q&A function. We will read these questions on the Q&A part of this session. All right, without further ado, let's start with today's session. And I'm going to um, ask our speaker, Caroline Trubetskoy, chairperson of the Saint Lucia National Conservation Fund, to come off screen because I have a question for you, Caroline. All right. So the question for you, Caroline, and thank you for joining us. You are very busy today. You are attending a conference in London, so thank you for the time for being with us today. The question is, could you provide an overview and a little bit of a history of the Marine Health Alliance's core objectives and how it integrates community-led approaches into marine conservation efforts in St. Lucia?
Thank you, Christian. And in your introduction, you have, of course, spoken a little bit already about where the Marine Health Alliance came from. And looking at it now, we have been working on this since 2023. And what really drove us to create a Marine Health Alliance was the fact that when you look at the Caribbean, is no exception. And at the same time, we know that a lot of the tourism we get in the Caribbean needs a healthy marine environment. The Nature Conservancy had an excellent study done together with the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association, where they wanted to actually encourage hoteliers to pay more attention to marine health and get involved. And they established that probably about 30% of all tourism in the Caribbean is associated, it's what they call reef-associated tourism activities. So a healthy marine environment is so critical for the success also of our tourism industry. And I think that's what sort of, we tried to come up with something, how we could connect specifically with our visitors. And the National Conservation Fund does, of course, already do fantastic work that includes, I would say, protection of biodiversity and includes marine health. But we felt if we wanted to create interest for marine health specifically, we should call it that. And then, of course, the question was, how would we actually connect with the visitors? And we wanted to ensure that there was a simple donation mechanism that guests could take advantage of when they come to the island. And we were able to work with Republic Bank in St. Lucia to allow us an online credit, which sounds simple to some, but honestly, in the Caribbean, things like that are sometimes a lot more challenging to come by than one thinks. And so we have now created the website with this lovely donate button. And of course, travelers would have the opportunity to also make like bigger contributions, not just a one time, but to become like stewards of the ocean, or, you know, make an annual contribution if they like. So at the same time, of course, we realized that there's more to it. We can also now reach out to our hotels. So any organization in St. Lucia that would like to go in partnership with the Marine Health Alliance and become one of our sponsors, there's opportunity, for example, to also work with the hotels to create more sustainable fishing, how should I say, and more sustainable fishing methods, so that hotels are in a better position to sustainably purchase their fish needs on island. So who do we want to work with? So our partners, and remember, we are at a charity, we would collect the funds and then we would have calls for proposals, and we would then make these funds available to local communities, other NGOs, or really any stakeholders that are committed to marine conservation. We, of course, also want to work very closely with our government agencies, especially fisheries, and also ensure that whatever happens, that there is also a holistic approach to it, because you can't just have every community come up with, oh, we're going to do a coral nursery there, we want to do this. There also has to be the holistic strategy of what makes sense in St. Lucia. How can we work together to get the most out of all of these efforts and really bring about an improvement for our reefs and many other areas. So, of course, one of the goals would be protecting our marine biodiversity, but then also really we want to advocate for responsible fishing practices and also the sustainable utilization of marine resources to support local livelihoods and ecological balance. We want to, of course, very closely work with our communities and also empower them and ensure that there is a sense of ownership and stewardship in having them involved and really having them run their own initiatives. There's a lot of work to be done with enhancing marine education and awareness. And of course, as I already mentioned, I think our collaboration with fisheries is really key to also having the scientific research done and collecting all the data needed so that what we are trying to achieve makes sense. But most importantly, we wanted to create something that can become this link to our visitors and that also really is this initiative that will advocate with all organizations on island to showcase the importance of our marine health and the marine environment. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you so much for that, Caroline. I think it was a remarkable speech, and thank you for your contributions. Now I'm going to ask Craig Henry, CEO of the Saint Lucia National Conservation Fund, to come on screen because I have a question for you, Craig.
For sure.
So, community engagement is often cited as a crucial issue for sustainable conservation. What strategies has the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund and the Marine Health Alliance employed to foster genuine community ownership and participation?
Thank you very much, Christian, for this. And let me say good morning, everyone. Welcome and good afternoon. I guess we are all over the world. And let me follow on from Caroline's introduction on speaking of the need for more coordinated, cooperative approach to marine conservation. The focus on the community is essential. And I will say that integrating marine conservation and community involvement are very significant and critical to advancing especially marine ecosystem conservation programs. So the rationale, of course, is that all ocean states or small island states have many things in common, and I will highlight two of them, that they're heavily dependent, of course, on coastal resources, marine coastal resources and terrestrial resources for socioeconomic benefit, subsistence activities, nutrition, and protection. And relatedly, I would say that increasingly, of course, these islands are heavily impacted by climate impacts, storms, frequent storms, storm events, rising sea surface temperatures, and of course, biodiversity loss in the marine ecosystem area. And so, given that there is a heavy dependence on marine resources and then the negative impacts that they're facing, the idea that we need to identify and prioritize marine conservation is critical and important for us all. I would also say that the community's participation is not a voluntary idea, or it's not something to be considered on the side. It is regarded as critical to ensure that whatever conservation programs that are devised or promoted or planned have the community along. And what that means is that, first of all, they have to contribute to the process. They have to understand the dynamics of what they're facing, the challenges they're facing, and they themselves can inform that program. So given that the community is dependent and are very close to the marine resources, they have significant information and knowledge that would be critical to informing a program. Secondly, I would say that in order for not only the education, but also they have to be empowered to participate and not just say we are creating a space for the community to become involved, but they have to be able to pursue the activities, whether or not we're talking about sustainable livelihoods or how to contribute to a program of probably mangrove restoration, coral reef enhancement, and so on and so forth. So the empowerment comes through various methods, either in the decision-making processes, learning how to develop skills to help to contribute to conservation, so on and so forth, and even promote within the communities sustainable practices and so on and so forth, so that that knowledge base is shared and is standardized across the board. I would dare say that working in a community can be difficult work because, of course, there are practices and that are unsustainable, but community members and others consider to be, you know, most efficient, and they're used to it. So getting over bad habits particularly challenging, but it does not mean that we have to shy away from these difficult conversations and shy away from really doing the work. However, I also think that what we try to do at the SLUNCF, there is a heavy emphasis on collaboration and empowerment. And why I say that is that collaboration not only with community residents or livelihoods or resource users, I'm talking about on a national level where you have agencies that are aiming to do the same thing that we are doing, empowering communities, working on promoting and developing more sustainable livelihoods programs, restoration of coastal natural resources, and so on and so forth. So the important thing is that we have to be able to understand what is happening in the landscape, in the conservation, marine conservation landscape in particular, and identify the actors, and of course the programs that we are all doing. So why I would say, I would add to that is, one, there seems to be, and there is a lot of duplication in this sector. There are many agencies, the Department of Fisheries, you hear of probably private interests who may want, for instance, to establish a coral restoration program. Now, while that is noble, what this means is that many people are doing the same thing, but we are not sure of the standard that is established. We are facing competing messages, and as well, while everyone is in stakeholder consultations, what we are doing is we are frustrating and, of course, burdening local communities with all these meetings and sessions what you often hear is that, okay, another meeting, and what is this one about, and so on and so forth. So what we are trying to do, or what we aim to do with the Marine Health Alliance, is that we're trying to coordinate our activities and work with, for example, the Department of Fisheries. We have worked with flora and fauna to coordinate programs related to the CMOS sector, for example. Recently, or I would say 2 years ago, just alongside when we established the Marine Health Alliance, or we were conceptualizing it, the SLUNCF spearheaded an effort to create what is called the Coral Reef Enhancement Committee for St. Lucia. And what that was, again, is to try to find some way of coordinating coral enhancement programs in St. Lucia in a more holistic and strategic way. So we would have an understanding based on who was interested, who has the resources, and what has been done before, what are the important lessons learned. And so this committee and this mechanism can help to filter that message, either streamline activities in a strategic way, and of course contribute to any interest who may have an opportunity to advance that program forward. I will also highlight, for example, that, you know, not only in terms of governance, but there's also in terms of projects that aim to build certain sectors. Right before we started this session, my colleague Orisha and I, and of course Tanya from CBF, we were talking about another important sector in the marine space, and that is the CMO sector. That is something, that is an area that requires a lot more strategic alignment across various agencies, civil society, community, and even governance, because we recognize that the CMOS sector has become an area of huge economic potential, but there are also challenges associated with how it is that CMOS farming and CMOS production is being practiced by our local communities. And so there is a recognition that not only in St. Lucia, but across the region, there is an opportunity to share knowledge that could be to the benefit of all. And so for us at the SLUNCF and through the Marine Health Alliance, we're hoping to coordinate messaging, coordinate resources, and bring a standard across the board that would be to the benefit of the community and have real community participation through empowerment, through community leadership and co-management and so on of resources. And so I look forward to the point where we can establish or have that institutionalize these kinds of arrangements that could speak to real community-led programs. And with that, I will end my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. That was remarkable. And it's always nice to hear how the Marine Health Alliance is doing active change in the sector. And you are ensuring that local voices are prioritized with everything that you are doing. I think that's also a very good opportunity. I also wanted to ask you if you could share a little bit of examples of community-led initiatives or projects that are being planned.
So I would have mentioned just now, I will highlight in focus particularly in the CMOS sector. And it is community-led because I would say that the community is ahead of us in terms of seeing how this particular sector, CMOS farming, could alleviate many of the issues related to lack of employment, nutrition, economic sustenance. And so what we have right now in Saint Lucia and other islands in the region is that we have a very prolific CMOS production sector, and whereby the demand for CMOS globally is propelling or encouraging the growth of production. There's the expansion of CMOS farms. However, there is a recognition that, like any other natural resource dependent practice, there's need to bring together a standard for best practice and also to safeguard, put in those safeguards that could help to alleviate some of the challenges associated with expanding CMOS production in the marine space. And that includes impacts on other ecosystems such as seagrass meadows and so on and so forth. So the conversation is that not only do we have to play catch up, but it also means that we have to be prepared to face a little bit of a difficulty on the side of the CMOS farmers and others who are already in production mode, and of course, who may have difficulty understanding or being used to doing things differently, although they may see the importance of it. But if it's going to impact for instance, the bottom dollar, then there might be some resistance. So this is why engagement with the community is very critical, and that this is why the coordination among the agencies, government agencies, the Department of Fisheries, Crown Lands, for example, these conversations are happening at various levels. And so there's been opportunity to involve the community. And through joint projects, joint programs, we are trying our best to coordinate so that we do not have duplication of effort. And that again, that's what I mentioned there. In this example, we had projects from the SLUNCF standpoint where we were engaging CMOS farmers in training and capacity building, but we recognized that there were other projects doing the same thing in exactly the same location. And so we made it an effort and a point to really coordinate our project activities that would support the CMOS farmers, and that we were not doing things in a disjointed way. We were not going to frustrate the CMOS farmers with too many consultations and so on and so forth. And we wanted there to be a similar, common stream of messaging, activities, and of course, expectation of them, but also what the CMOS farmers and associated interests are requiring from the governance agencies or are requesting from NGOs or funding agencies like ours. So that is an example, I think, that could be mimicked in other situations with regards to how you have sustainable livelihoods at play, but you also have need for governance structures and instruments to guide the use, to guide the practice of fishing, of coral reef enhancement, or any activity that involves the marine space. And that is my response to this particular question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Craig. And I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat. Keep them coming, but I'm also want to remind to our esteemed audience, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please make sure to use the Q&A box, and we will read those questions when the Q&A section of this session comes in a few minutes. Now I would like to ask the Deputy Chief Fisheries Officer of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Food Security and Rural Development of Saint Lucia, Mr. Thomas Nelson, to please take the floor for a question for you. Thank you and welcome. The question is, marine protected areas are a vital tool for ecosystem conservation. How can the Marine Health Alliance influence the design and management of MPAs in Saint Lucia? And what challenges do you anticipate in implementing these areas?
Good. Thank you very much, Christian, for that question. And good day, everyone. As you indicated, I'm Thomas Nelson, the Deputy Chief Fisheries Officer of the Department of Fisheries. And certainly, even before I go to your question, it gives me a great pleasure to join this important conversation. Certainly for us at the department, marine conservation is really not just about protecting fish or habitats, but it's really about safeguarding livelihoods, strengthening community resilience, and preserving that part of our culture and identity. I've always said that if we were to leave the natural resources on their own, they will be able to balance out. So it is really, the management of people, community, and ensuring that there is sustainability. In relation to your question, in Saint Lucia, the Marine Health Alliance can certainly support a very collaborative approach to marine protected area design and management. And I would also like to indicate, the other nomenclature, which is marine managed areas, MMAs, or even environmental protection areas, because usually there is a sometimes negative connotation to the terminology marine protected areas. So rather than government working in isolation, it is certainly critical, for the utilization of fisher folk, local government organizations, non-government organizations, as well as coastal residents together to discuss, priorities and map out the use of coastal marine resources during the process, as well as for the establishment, identify critical areas for sustainability, as well as biodiversity, and the protection of livelihoods of the persons who really depend on those resources for their survival. Let me say that whereas there are many challenges that the Marine Health Alliance will inevitably face, in the approach and design the design and management of marine protected areas or marine managed areas, including the existential threat of climate change, very extreme tropical storms and extreme events. You have the issue of land-based sources of pollution, as well as the challenge of finance. So all of these issues will certainly have to be considered. All these challenges would have to be faced in the design and management of marine protected areas or marine managed areas. But I believe that the main challenge is really balancing conservation objectives and the economic realities of fishing and tourism. In the marine environment, fishing related activities is one of the primary activities for coastal communities. And tourism-related activities is also a main activity that takes place around the coast. And therefore, these two activities of the objectives and really balancing the approach and the strategies so that these two activities can coexist. I mean, we all know that Saint Lucia is heavily dependent on tourism, and we also know that fisheries is critically important for the coastal communities along the coast. So therefore, communities need to see that the establishment of marine protected areas or marine managed areas in healthier reefs, more resilient fisheries, and long-term economic opportunities. So by ensuring that this ideology is recognized and it is important, we can ensure that the sustainability of marine protected areas and marine managed areas, are realized. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for that. I also wanted to follow up with a question. Are there innovative management practices or monitoring techniques planning to be used on this Marine Health Alliance? Thomas, are you with us?
Yes, I'm there. Can you hear me?
Yes. You froze
Yes.
for a second. I think there was a connection issue. I'm going to repeat the
Yes.
question. Are
Yeah,
there
sure. Thank you.
innovative management practices or monitoring techniques being used or planning to be used?
Yes, there are certainly some innovative management practices, recognizing the advent of the massive penetration of IT. We believe that communities could get involved. Simple logbooks, and even drones in some cases, so that the health of reefs can be tracked, as well as the health of fish stocks. So the advent of, as I indicated earlier, the advent of IT, the use of mobile apps can certainly be utilized so that we can better monitor the health of coral reefs, the health of fish stocks. The young people, they are really into IT. And we must really utilize these platforms and these means to help with monitoring of the resources within marine protected areas and marine managed areas. Citizen science has been a very powerful tool, and it has been proven time and time again, and we must never underestimate the power of citizens, both from the data collection as well as education. We've utilized, for example, Reef Check for a long time in terms of monitoring our coral reef systems. And this is really based on voluntary participation and the use of community groups and practitioners within the sector to really monitor the health of reefs and provide information to government agencies and policy makers, so that it could really, make critical decisions for the sustainability of these resources. There is also need for continued review and testing of co-management models. These have been tried and tested again in the past, and we've had some examples which have been supported by the Saint Lucia National Conservation Fund and the Department of Fisheries. And these innovations could really help marine protected areas, not just a government mandate, but also a shared community asset. As I said earlier, there have been examples where citizen science, co-management have been utilized, and we really need to consider beefing up, so to speak, these approaches and make them even more sexy or more attractive to persons who would generally not utilize or not be willing to participate in these approaches. And some of these examples have been recognized in the Soufrière Marine Management Area since 1995, has really been a model in terms of the utilization of co-management approaches. The Point Sab Environmental Protection Area on the southeast coast of the island, the Labri Bay, and the management of CMOS in the Point Sab Environmental Area, which Craig alluded to, as well as the management of the white sea urchin. For a number of years, co-management approaches have been utilized in more or less the traditional way, but I believe that we really need to utilize information technology so that we can enhance these strategies moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Thomas. And I can see a lot of people interested in getting to know the Marine Health Alliance. So I'm going to be screen sharing for all of you to know that you can scan a QR code here and go directly to the Marine Health Alliance website. I'm also going to post the link in the chat so everyone has it. So please go ahead and visit. And I would like also to remind you to add any questions you may have for our panelists on the Q&A box on the lower left on Zoom. Without further ado, I'm going to ask our next panelist, Annette Fleischer, Program Coordinator of the Global Carbon Market at GIZ Global, to take the stage, because I have a question for you, Annette. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep the presentation there so people can scan and go directly to the Marine Health Alliance's website. So, Annette, climate change poses significant threats to Caribbean marine ecosystems. How does the Marine Health Alliance plan to address climate resilience, particularly in the context of coastal development and sea level rising?
Good morning, colleagues. Good afternoon to those who are joining us, not from the Caribbean, but from other places in the world. Thank you very much, Christian, for the introduction and also for the question. As Christian was mentioning, Annette Fleischer is my name, working for the German Development Corporation. It's an implementing agency commissioned by several ministries in Germany. I'm based in Saint Lucia and currently responsible for two programs. One is a program on carbon market and the other one is a Euroclima program. Both of them are focusing on climate change related issues. And I would just like to highlight the importance of the support the German government is providing for Saint Lucia, but not only for Saint Lucia, but for several Caribbean islands in the Eastern Caribbean, So we are currently supporting a number of islands, but also regional organizations, including the CARICOM, the Caribbean Community, but also the OECS Commission, which is the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States Commission, also based here in Saint Lucia. So with having said that, GSZ is ready to support the Marine Health Alliance with a number of initiatives. So there have been initiatives in the past which focused on, for example, sustainable marine financing. And I'm happy to share some links also later on in the chat. For example, under that project, the marine protected areas were supported also with a digital payment system. In addition, there was a database produced on marine financing, which is publicly available. And as I said, I will share the link in the chat in a couple of minutes. There have been also some initiatives looking more closely into the area of mangrove restoration in particular. So we did a pilot study, particularly on Saint Lucia, focusing on 2 mangrove forests in the country. And we looked particularly into areas how these mangrove forests could be protected, but also, as I said, restored. And one of the ideas which we came up with is the importance, of course, to work together with the private sector. As Caroline was mentioning at the beginning, all of the countries in the Caribbean are strongly focused on tourism, and the tourism industry is a very important industry. So the cooperation between the public and the private sector is very important. So one of the ideas was to potentially develop a project, a blue carbon project, focusing on the mangrove forest, and having the engagement also from the private sector, from the tourism sector, but also, as Greg was saying, focusing on the community engagement itself. And this is very important to also make those projects more sustainable. Greg also mentioned the strong coordination between agencies. So I would like to say that the German government is obviously not the only agency working in Saint Lucia, but also in the region. And also there are a number of agencies who work on similar issues. So the coordination between these agencies is very important. Just to mention some of them, there's a project of the French government also looking at mangrove restoration in a number of the Caribbean countries. There's also a project on blue financing by the CBF, by the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, the Bluefin project. And there's also an initiative under the Euroclima, which looks more into biodiversity issues. So also from GSZ, we have a number of very new projects coming up. All of these projects will be managed from Saint Lucia, but involving other countries in the Eastern Caribbean than Saint Lucia itself. So I just would like to mention there's a Blue Economy project coming up, which is looking very much forward to work very closely with the Marine Health Alliance. There's another project managed by the same person. It's a Blue and Green Jobs and Skills project. I think this is also very, very important for the Marine Health Alliance to actually offer specific programs, specific TVET programs to provide qualifications for the young persons on the islands. And the last point I would like to mention is really the issue of sargassum, which is obviously not directly related to any climate change issues. Nevertheless, sargassum is a very, very important topic, not only, as I said, in Saint Lucia, but also in the entire Caribbean. So this is also one of the opportunities where we are currently looking into whether that could be something for a carbon market project, for example, turning sargassum into compost or biogas, for example. So this is, I would leave it like that for the moment. Happy to receive more questions later on, but I think we can give the floor also to the other speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annette. Thank you, Annette. All right. So we can continue with our next panelist. So I welcome to the floor Orisha Joseph, Executive Director of Sustainable Grenadines. Orisha, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone.
Thank you. All right, so I have a question for you. How does the Marine Health Alliance coordinate with broader regional initiatives or Caribbean strategies for marine conservation? And what opportunities and challenges exist in fostering regional collaboration?
So much. And thanks again to St. Lucia National Conservation Fund and Island Innovation for inviting SUSGREN to be a part of that. So SUSGREN is a transboundary organization and we work between Grenada and St. Vincent. So to answer your question, the Marine Health Alliance, I believe they do collaborate and have strategies when it comes to regional initiatives. I believe in terms of supporting regional frameworks, like the Caribbean Challenge Initiative, based on the work that they are doing. I also think that they work towards the OECS ocean governance and blue economy agendas because of the work that they are supporting. I also want to highlight working with regional organization is also very important. For example, the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, they are a key partner. I believe organizations like the Caribbean Climate Change Center, the 5Cs, and also the OECS, I think those are really critical. Regional organizations to work with to ensure marine conservation actions are harmonized across borders. And also looking at facilitating knowledge exchange. That's why we're here today, right? Working between and working with local NGOs, governments, regional networks, for example, the Grenadine Network of Marine Protected Areas, MPA Connect, and other local organizations across the region. And I think it's very important because strategizing those sort of initiatives help to leverage funding partnerships in terms of mobilizing resources for projects that complement each other in terms of regional biodiversity, climate change resilience, and blue economy goals. And I think that is very key and important when projects can come together to leverage partnership and resources. Most times we hear, funding is always an issue, or it's not enough funding, but it's good. I know Annette mentioned AFD, they are doing a mangrove project in the region soon between Grenada and St. Vincent, but also the funding that has been through the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, the Jeff Small Grants Program. So I think bringing all the players together is always very important to ensure that we could really harmonize those sort of partnership for funding and resources. With that said, I think it's also very important to look at some of the opportunities when it comes to regional collaboration. And because we're here, I think we have over 100 people on the call, it is also part of sharing resources and expertise. I think, and one example I could speak towards is MPA Connect and the Grenadines Network of Marine Protected Areas. Back, I believe, in 2013, 2014, we were able, between Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines and Grenada, to develop what we call a technical guru team. And that team was our coral reef experts when we need to do coral reef monitoring using the AGRA protocol, Atlantic and Gulf Rapid Reef Assessment. And I think one of our technical guru team is in the chat. That's Dr. Clem Morale, and also other persons. So I think it's important in terms of sharing technical skills, monitoring, and all of these things, because without these sort of opportunities, and we know in the region, we have a lot of people who have the skill, the expertise, and the know-how to really implement some of these initiatives. I also think in terms of the Marine Health Alliance, in terms of regional collaboration, is in terms of sharing like policy harmonization. While we know that our region is very unique in itself, but I also think there is also a lot of opportunity for harmonizing our policies in terms of coordinated advocacy, and that can drive stronger regional wide-based policies, and also sustainable fisheries in terms of marine protected areas, climate adaptation, and also when we're looking at small business enterprises in terms of merging, conservation and business development. We also want to think about scaling up innovations. We know what is happening. I think there's shared knowledge and opportunities for coral nursery exchange. I know Saint Lucia has a program that is happening. I also know Dominican Republic is doing some cool coral nursery innovative ideas that can be shared in the region. Craig, my colleague, mentioned CMOS farming. That again, it's something that is hot off the press, and I think is something that we should really come together. Currently, we Susgren have a small grants with the St. Vincent Conservation Fund to assist CMOS farmers post-hurricane burial recovery. And between this year and next year, we're planning to host the second national CMOS Expo on mainland St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And we're really excited about it. And again, opportunities for scaling up innovations. What else we can think about? Replicating ecosystem-based adaptation. We know that some areas have gone through hurricane burial. A lot of our mangrove forests were affected. And I think now is a good time to look at what is happening in terms of what sort of innovative ways or we can look at rehabilitating after such strong impacts of hurricane. So I think Marine Health Alliance is really posed at doing that. And also too, in terms of a region, just the collective bargaining power, I think is important for us when we come together in collaborating across the Caribbean region, because we know are seen as a united front, and we can influence hopefully better on the international scene in terms of negotiations and being able to acquire things like climate financing and ensuring to have policies that are respected. So I think the Marine Health Alliance is doing really good, and I just wanted to leave some of these opportunities and things that is already happening across the region and with initiatives and stakeholders and just colleagues where we're doing excellent work amongst ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harish, and your speech was remarkable. And it reminds me of, well, a dream that I know that some of us Caribbean people have of a Caribbean Union, kind of like the European Union, right?
Yes,
So one of
yes.
these efforts is going to follow through and make it happen perhaps in the future. And I know that a lot of people resonate with this. So thank you so much. I see a lot of people from different places from the Caribbean and the globe participating. So we're going to run over a few more minutes later because we are eager to still have more information. And our audience, both here and on social media, would like to know more. There is a follow-up question, Orisha, about knowledge exchange. How can knowledge exchange enhance the conservation outcomes across the Caribbean?
And that is such an important and critical question because we're always talking about knowledge exchange and building capacity. And I think it's very crucial. Without knowledge exchange, I think in terms of continuity of some of the programs and initiatives that is happening, you can't have that without we continuing to share information and knowledge. Some of the challenges with that is in terms of, where do we share the data? Who is left with how, sometimes there's this coordination fatigue, sensitive information, the geopolitical space. But I think in the midst of those challenges, being able to pass on information is very critical because I know that there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of initiatives, a lot of great work happening in the Caribbean. But sometimes when it's time to find that information or, where do you go for that information? And also, I think it's time that we're able to trust each other and be able to share information of the work that we're doing without feeling that, our intellectual properties might be stolen or someone else might get funding or the praise for doing certain things. And I think that's where we need to build trust in terms of knowledge sharing amongst ourselves, because it only augurs well for us to be able to pass on these information. And especially when most of us work in environments that are very for example, let me use the transboundary Grenadines where I work. Grenada and St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I call them cousins. It's kind of like Saint Lucia and Dominica, right? And the fauna that travels between our islands, they don't use passports and they don't use computers, but these are the areas that we manage. Without Grenada or St. Vincent having certain key information, knowledge, initiatives in terms of what is happening, well, we can't just really draw an imaginary line and say, hey, I'm not sharing knowledge, or hey, I'm not doing this, because sometimes it hurts us. So I think for all of us on this call, and even the organizations that we work with, to really understand the importance of passing on, that is how you help the next generation. That is how we have our footprints to see that this is what we would have done. This can be revised, but these are some of the fundamental bases of the things we would have worked. And also very key is incorporating, I think Mr. Thomas mentioned it, incorporating local knowledge is so important. And also using young people. Young people now, they are so good in terms of transferring information as quickly as possible. Obviously, understanding that we should share information that is well vetted, but also to incorporate them and get them going. I know some of the countries, they're doing community-based initiatives in terms of having, we call them junior rangers, where you train young people. And I think it was an initiative out of Belize where you train young people to do a lot of the monitoring and things like that. And they will be the one passing on that information. And in some cases, you have people who want to go on to work in spaces like this. So again, trust is very important, but also understanding that we need to have institutional knowledge and be able to transfer that without fear or favor, I guess I could say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Arisha. And it's so nice to see many people participating in the Q&A box. And we have some of our panelists addressing your questions there. And now I would like to ask Tanya Liu, Conservation Finance Program Manager at the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, to take the stage for a question. Tanya? Financial sustainability is often a concern for conservation projects. What are some of the regional best practices on building long-term support for marine health and conservation initiatives?
All right, thanks. Thank you so much, Christian. And again, also, thank you so much for SLUNCF, for Island Innovation, for inviting the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund to the stage. Very interesting discussions. I think for us, let me start with the relationship that the CBF has with SLUNCF, the Saint Lucia National Conservation Fund. For us, that is a long-term commitment and engagement. We are more than just a donor. The CBF is a donor. We provide for the financial resources, I would say. But beyond that, I think for example, with SLUNCF, we have had this collaboration since 2017. So yes, we provide financial resources to SLUNCF, mainly through our CBF endowment funds, but we also have other types of financing, I would say, from other projects that we channel to the SLUNCF. But for me, that is one example of a long-term commitment, engagement for marine conservation, which is backed with our CBF endowment funds. So endowment funds, of course, are one ways where you can commit to long-term sustainable financing. But I think most recently in the region, we would have seen a lot of appetite for governments and partners to look at other types of mechanisms. And let me mention, for example, the debt for nature swaps. Bahamas has just recently done one, but we also have Belize and Barbados in our region who have also successfully completed one. And where we see the role of the conservation trust funds when it comes down to these big mechanisms with big funds, and where you need an organization on the ground, such as a conservation trust fund, such as SLUNCF, who knows the communities, who has the trust that we speak about, who has the mechanisms in place, who is non-government, and who can then indeed be the transparent, I would say, mechanism to channel some of these funds. So again, I really applaud this initiative, the Marine Health initiative of the SLUNCF. Congratulations. I think I've seen how the SLUNCF has grown and keeps on growing. And I see that this is one way where we can find those public-private partnerships, which for me is another example what we can see also in the region, where we need to think about other funding than just the public funding. Right? We need to think about the non-traditional funders. So we have some examples in the region where we see, for example, where MPAs can be effectively managed privately. It can. I mean, there are good examples out there. I have seen examples in Dominican Republic and other islands where the public-private partnership in managing the MPAs, making sure that we can benefit from the fees that MPAs can collect, and how this collection of fees can go back to management, effective management of MPAs. So I will just stop there. I think Annette just mentioned also that we do have a blue carbon project, and we are working together with the partners to make sure that, for me at least, one of the milestones for 2026 would be to pilot a blue carbon mechanism in the Caribbean and really just go into the practice of it. I think we have done a lot of research. We have done a lot of guidelines already. I think most of the organizations already have guidelines and protocols. We want to be able to say, okay, let's just do it. There'll be errors, there'll be pitfalls. It doesn't matter, I think. For us, it matters that we just try and start somewhere. And I think that would be the key message also with sustainable financing. We don't have to think about the millions, but if we can just put $1, every month into management, and you can find 100 people who can do that on a long-term basis, that is for me a long-term sustainable mechanism. Start small, and let's start from there, and then we can talk about millions and billions of US dollars for marine conservation. So thank you so much, Christian, and back to you.
Thank you, Tanya, for that. It was another interesting set of remarks. And I would like to ask all of our panelists to turn on your cameras to address some questions from the audience in this final part of the session. Some of these questions have that we have been seeing here have been answered. So if you don't hear your answer here, esteemed members of the audience, please go to the Q&A box to the answer tab, because 4 questions have already been answered by our distinguished panelists. Thank you for that. I have a question here from Eric Salamanca that is about the transition to renewable source of energy or clean sources of energy. What are your views about offshore wind energy projects or other emerging marine energy resources, which will definitely be installed in the marine environment? Do you think that they can coexist with marine protection projects? I leave this open to anyone that wants to take it. Any takers for that question?
Yes, let me take a quick stab at it. I feel that importantly, I know that many countries have that option where they're looking at explorations of use of the marine space, specifically with regards to energy sourcing and harvesting. I do believe that the technology is out there that those things can coexist. However, it is really having a strong environmental framework that's quite important, and that is something that the national government and authorities have to have in place to safeguard its marine resources. And that's not just in a manner of speaking about just local communities. There are other, of course, broader consideration with regards to the use of the resources within its boundaries. Also protecting things, infrastructure and ecosystems inland, safeguarding community interest in the terrestrial species as well. So I believe that the most important thing that has to happen is a very transparent and accountable process, and where possible, the government needs to explore, of course, alternative energy sources to promote economic development for its citizens. That is undeniable. It is just a matter of on what basis and framework that these things can happen. It must be transparent. There must be legal considerations, and of course, there must be a lot of attention on environmental sustainability. That is my thought. These are my thoughts on that.
Thank you for that, Craig. And to the member of the audience who asked the question, I have some examples for you that are not based in the Caribbean, but you could take a look online at the windmills project in Gran Canaria. If any of you have traveled there, you would see a lot of windmills throughout the coast. And they also coexist with a very government-led project on sustainability and the protection of the ocean, which is very strong in Gran Canaria. And we can see some examples next year on the Global Sustainable Island Summit 2026 that we're going to be hosting there in Gran Canaria. So, Eric, you are welcome to take a look at those developments as well. I strongly support Craig's remarks that the two can coexist. We just need to make sure that we tick all of the boxes for that. There is another question here from Petal Joseph. Given that management of our marine areas, protected or not, is critical for their conservation, what metrics can or should be used to justify the extent to which resources are exploited for economic growth? Orisha, would you like to give it a go?
Yes. Yes, so about to answer. I
I
think
have a feeling.
sometimes it's really hard to say which matrix you could use, and I think it's based on the situation you're at. I always say in terms of it's like a balancing act, right? It's all like on the scale of justice. So you look at it and you realize, well, how much people will be affected because people and nature always and must work hand in hand in terms of what will be the benefit. And when you weigh, okay, this is the community. If I were to have this intervention, would that benefit the community? Would that benefit nature? What are some of the things that will be disrupted? And if your matrix is happening where one is really off balance, then you know that probably may not work. And again, it has to be, and balance in nature and development is very tricky, but I think it also has to be where we are open and transparent and fair. And also when we make a mistake to say we have made a mistake and this is the other area we can look at. And again, I will go back to the community, always using that local knowledge to find out what probably have worked in the past, what was a mistake made, and what we can do. So my matrix is always the balancing scale of ensuring that nature is protected, but people can also survive. So is that connection there?
Thank you so much for that, Orisha. And there's a comment in the chat from Annette that I would like you, Annette, to explain a little bit more because I have seen people ask these throughout the chat, and it's about the marine financing database, and you shared a link there. Could you share more about that?
Yes, you can just go on the link and you find a number of funding agencies, different development cooperation partners, and so on, who are in a position to potentially support projects in the marine protection area. So this was developed under a GIZ project called Sustainable Marine Financing, which unfortunately ended last year. Nevertheless, there's two new projects, as I said, Blue Economy and Blue and Green Jobs, which will take up some of the work which has been done under that project. And this is about to start soon. So hopefully we can pick up on the work which has been done already and take it up from there.
Right. Thank you so much. With that, and I know that people would like this panel to continue more, but we have some other sessions. I would like to thank you all for your remarkable participation here on this panel. I think that we are coming off with more knowledge, and we are very eager to see all of the success for the Marine Health Alliance that is going to come. I'm sure of that. And I would like to thank each of you, Orisha, Craig, Caroline, Annette, Thomas, and Tanya, for participating in this session. please go ahead and visit the Marine Health Alliance website that is being shared on the chat. Go there, find out more. We have a lot of information on the website from the St. Lucia National Conservation Fund, one of our most esteemed clients. So thank you everyone for that. And as I mentioned earlier, for those of you who may have missed this on yesterday's opening session, we share very exciting news. And Island Innovation is partnering with the Cabildo of Gran Canaria to host the Global Sustainable Island Summits 2026. After this year's experience in the Caribbean in St. Kitts and Nevis, now the Macaronesian region and Europe will take the spotlight. The summit will be held from April 20th to the 22nd, 2026, and we'll be discussing solutions and advancements in sustainability. Please note that all attendees of the Virtual Island Summit can get an additional discount on the early bird ticket using a special coupon that is being shared on the chat right now. And also, don't miss the opportunity to enroll on the new Island Innovation course, Sustainable Islands course, Strategies, Finance, and Leadership for Innovation. Take a look at the link in the chat for more information. Our next session is coming up in 48 minutes and is going to be charting a pathway to a geothermal future. Don't miss it. Thank you, everyone, and see you at the next session.